Okay, so the second round matchup of the Nets versus the Bucks have been confirmed. So let's do a series preview, which for a series that I think is going to be one of the best this playoffs. And there's just so much going on in this series, and I'm very, very excited. So Nets versus Bucks. The Nets were the second seed this year. They finished with a 48-24 record. They were first in offense and 23rd in defense, whereas the Bucks were only 2 games behind them with a 46-26 record, and they're the 3 seed, and they're 6th in offense and 10th in defense. And then in the first round, both teams made pretty easy work of their opposition, with the Nets beating the Celtics in 5 and the Bucks impressively sweeping the Miami Heat. And then both of them also have a they both have injury problems, with the Nets having Jeff Green out and the Bucks having Dante DiVincenzo out. So 2 players who I think could have definitely played a role in this series are out. But still a great series. Both teams have little to no excuses. So if we talk about the Bucks offense first, and the first thing that comes to mind is just Giannis and how I think he has the ability to absolutely dominate in this series. Against the Bucks, they played 3 times, and the Bucks went 2-1 with the winning the second and third game, both at home. A quick note, in the first game that the Nets won, there was no Kyrie, and then in games 2 and 3, there was no Harden. So both teams have not played each other at full strength. But yeah, back to Giannis. I think he'll have the ability to dominate. He got almost 50 points in a few of the matchups, and they just really have no one to stop him and no plan to stop him. Well, they'll have a plan, but I doubt it'll work. He just is a nightmare matchup for the Nets, and with his abilities at his size and his skill, I think he will definitely be dominant in this series in terms of isolations out top, transition, pick and roll, either as the ball handler or the screener. I think those are going to be important plays. Maybe he'll pull off a few handoffs with 3-point shooters, whether it be Holiday or Middleton or Forbes. I think they can have some success there. And then also post-ups. He had a lot of success in the post. I believe it was against Blake Griffin. So if that matchup happens again, expect Giannis to get down to the block, and I think he can definitely have some success there, as he has before. And then also, whether they do a bit of mismatch hunting with Giannis, and the ideal candidate for me has to be Kyrie Irving, because he's a lot smaller, but they could also hunt, when Bruce Brown's in the game. Maybe they want to make Harden work, though Harden's a decent post defender. Giannis could have some success in terms of ISOs or using him as a screener and just making the Nets' big 3 work on offense and getting them involved. I think that work on defense, and getting them involved. I think that can bring some success for the Bucks. Maybe not immediately, but they can still score on them, and then maybe they're a bit more worn down on the offensive end, and by the time the series goes to 5, 6, 7 games, the Nets are a bit exhausted. That could be an idea. And then apart from that, the Bucks also have Drew Holiday. I think his playmaking and the fact that the defense has to respect him as a shooter will definitely really be important for the Milwaukee Bucks. Drew can run pick and roll with Giannis. I suspect that'll be quite a common action. He can also just spot up and provide spacing while Giannis does his thing. And then maybe if they put Kyrie on him, he does this thing where in transition, he just goes to the post straight away. They throw it in and he gets a quick, easy turnaround, or he can just score over the defender. And I think he could pull that off, especially if he's guarded by Kyrie Irving. If they put someone a bit bigger on him, I don't know if Bruce Brown will be starting, but when he comes in, then maybe he'll be less successful. But they could also use Drew Holiday as a screener. Let's say he does have Bruce Brown on him. They could have Giannis handling it out top, and then have Drew Holiday come and screen for Giannis, and then the Nets would have to switch, or it could get Giannis going downhill. And I think Drew can be very important for the Bucks as an initiator and as a bit of a scorer too. And then there's also Middleton, who I suspect will be able to do his thing. I don't know who the Nets will put on him. I'm assuming Joe Harris off the top of my head, but it depends. I'll talk about the matchups a bit later, but he's such an excellent scorer, and he was very successful in the Heat series. He can hit tough shots, and they're going to need that sometimes, whether it be end of the shot clock or when Giannis isn't in the game. I think Middleton, if he comes up big, he could really be the X factor for the Bucks. And then also just providing spacing with his three-point shooting. He is always up in the high 30s, sometimes at 40%, so that's going to be important. And then apart from that, it's going to be the role players hitting their threes, whether it be Brook Lopez or Pat Connaughton or Bobby Portis. Just whoever is in the game for the Bucks needs to hit their threes so that the defense has to respect them. Because if they go cold from three, then the Bucks can just load up on Giannis, and I don't know if they'll stop him, but that makes it a lot harder. We've seen in the previous two postseasons that when the defense can ignore someone like Eric Bledsoe and they can close out on Giannis and throw 2-3 guys at him, it becomes a lot harder for the Bucks. So it's pivotal that the role players hit their threes and provide spacing. Someone who could definitely help that is Brent Forbes, who has played a bigger role for the Bucks in the playoffs. He was very good in that Heat series. He actually outscored Jimmy Butler, which is pretty funny. But yeah, he's really their best shooter, I think. And, whether it be, as I mentioned, the handoff plays with Giannis, if he's going to give a handoff to Forbes, that would force the defense to commit to Forbes because of his three-point shooting ability, and it could open up some lanes to some rim runs for Giannis. So I think Forbes can be key for them with his shooting. And then a few other things for how the Bucks can score offensively. Offensive rebounds. The Nets can give up a lot of offensive rebounds, especially if they're going with a small lineup with someone like Blake Griffin at center, which I suspect they will. Then the Bucks can attack the offensive boards, whether it be Brook Lopez or Giannis or just whoever's in the area. I think they can have some success there, and I think the Bucks will win the rebounding battle in this series, and I think that could be key if they're getting extra possessions, especially if Giannis gets an offensive rebound and he just goes back up with it. That's just an added 2 points that the Bucks might need during the series if the defense gets a lot tighter. So I think that could be something that helps out the Bucks. I think that's probably it for the Bucks offense. Maybe a few Brook Lopez post ups. We'll see who they put on them, because I'm like in the regular season games they had Blake Griffin on Giannis, which means that either someone like Kevin Durant or Joe Harris would be guarding Brook Lopez, or maybe they'll put Harden on Lopez. That would make more sense because Harden's a decent post defender, but Brook Lopez will likely be guarded by someone smaller than him, so maybe a few times they throw it into him in the post. You don't want to be doing that every possession, but maybe in a stretch where Giannis is out of the game, or just if they have nothing going offensively and he has a mismatch. I think maybe they could do that a few times. Yeah, so my questions is, who will guard Giannis on the Nets? I mentioned Blake Griffin did it in the few regular season games and it was not too successful. I think KD is probably the most equipped, but how much do they want to make KD work defensively? The Nets, that is. So will they put KD on Giannis? Because I think he has a better chance of guarding him, even though Giannis could have some success in the post. Or will they just stick with Blake or DeAndre Jordan if he plays, or Claxton, who I didn't mention? I think Claxton's going to be important for the Nets. Who are they going to put on Giannis? Because I think whoever they put on him, they're going to have success, the Bucks are, and they're going to have to bring doubles, but we'll see who starts on him. That'll be interesting. I suspect when Claxton's in the game, he'll actually take Giannis, but in the starting lineup, it could be KD or Blake. And then who does that leave on Drew or Middleton? I suspect you can put someone like Joe Harris on Middleton, or Kevin Durant on Middleton. I'd say one of the two, and then probably like Harden on Drew Holiday, which aren't great matchups for the Nets, but then again, their strength isn't really defensively, and I think the Bucks will be able to score. And then how much will the Nets switch? I think that will also be important, because if they're switching a ton, then Giannis is going to have some success in the post, and maybe Brook Lopez too. But if they try and stick to their man in pick and roll and things like that, then it could open up a lot of open shots. I suspect they'll be very happy to see Giannis shoot threes, but if they're sagging off of Giannis and then he goes for a handoff with Brent Forbes, like I mentioned, I'd suspect they'd step up on them, but then Forbes' guy would have to be guarding Giannis, which could be problematic. So then maybe they double Giannis as soon as he gets into the post, and then it starts the rotation. So what I'm getting at here is that I think the Bucks will definitely be able to have success offensively and be able to generate good open looks. And yeah, so that's sort of it for the Bucks offense. I won't go too much further. Okay, let's get to the Nets offense now, which I think there's a few less questions just because I feel the Nets offense is a bit more simple at its core, which is just the big three, my turn, your turn, my turn, that sort of offense. And, that's obviously not bad at all because they have three great isolation scorers in Kyrie, Harden, and Kevin Durant. But there's going to be other stuff. As I mentioned, this happens just more in the playoffs, mismatch hunting. And the two that come to mind for me, the two Bucks players that the Nets could pick on would be Brent Forbes and Brook Lopez. For Forbes, it's just that he's smaller, and if they get KD on him, he could go into the post. Even Harden could go into the post against him. And then he is also not a great perimeter defender, so ISOs, all that sort of stuff could definitely be available if they get Forbes switched on to one of the big three. And the second is Brook Lopez, and how I'd think it was someone setting a screen, and then, the Bucks are, like Brook Lopez's man for the Nets sets the screen, and let's say it's Harden as the ball handler, and let's say it's Claxton, and let's say Jrue Holiday is on Harden. So Claxton sets the screen. What do the Bucks do now? You obviously have to go over, because if you go under, it's a Harden 3 and it's 3 points. And then it's a 2-on-1 in Brook Lopez. And Brook Lopez is decent in those situations, but this isn't an ordinary ball handler. This is Harden. This is Kyrie. This is KD. These are guys who are some of the best players in the NBA. You can't just let them walk into floaters. You can't make it easy for them. So maybe then Brook Lopez has to step up, but then the lob is available, or Harden just goes by him and dunks. So you see the problem here. Maybe if they switch, then you have Brook Lopez on the perimeter versus Harden, which is just terrible. Maybe they hedge, but then Claxton gets on the short roll. Maybe they trap, and that could be an idea, especially if it's not Blake setting the screen, but someone who's maybe a lesser ball handler and passer like Claxton. Then you have 4-on-3 with Claxton with the ball, and we'll see. These are tough reads to make. The Bucks are a long defensive team that can rotate well. But then again, it's also 4-on-3 with NBA players. So I think the Nets are also going to be successful offensively, as they have been all season, just their incredible talent. And I think going after Forbes and Lopez is definitely going to be an option. And then maybe the Bucks just play those guys less, because the Bucks could have a lineup of Jrue Holiday, Pat Connaughton, Chris Middleton, Giannis, and PJ Tucker. And I sort of feel that's their best lineup. Maybe someone else instead of Pat Connaughton, but you get guys who can space the floor and also who can switch, because suddenly then the two defenders in that pick and roll are Jrue Holiday and PJ Tucker, and you can just switch that. You can have PJ Tucker on Harden. It's not great, but it's not the end of the world. And you can have Jrue Holiday on Claxton. Jrue Holiday is an excellent post defender, and Claxton is more of a roll guy, rim runner. So I think if the Bucks will have to go to lineups that maybe give up a little bit offensively in terms of shooting and a paint presence, but lineups that can switch defensively, and I think that's going to be very important for the Bucks. Other stuff, just handoff, trying to draw Brook Lopez out of the paint. They can't just let him sit in the paint. And I think that'll be important, opening up the paint so they can get easier baskets. We know the Nets can do it with jump shots, but you also want to get easy ones, especially in a tough playoff series like this is going to be. So I think opening up the paint, but then you also have the Bucks who are just who have Giannis, who is maybe the best help defender in the NBA and who will be able to rotate. And then it gets to, can your role players hit spot up threes? And I think so. I think yes, if it's the big three or Joe Harris, but maybe if it's Bruce Brown, he needs to cut off ball. And I think cutting is also important for the Nets, making sure you get off ball stuff, especially when it's the big three ISOing. You don't want everyone standing around. It's not the worst thing, but you want a bit of movement. You want to keep the Bucks guessing. You want to keep the Bucks thinking defensively. and then you want to punish them when they have to double or rotate. And the Nets certainly have the personnel to do that. So I think that will also be important from them. And then it's going to be, just Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving with the starters, and then Harden, how he runs with the bench unit. He'll get to run pick and roll and dominate the ball similar to how he did it in Houston. And then they also do this thing where they put Joe Harris with Harden in the bench unit, so that they always have two really good players out there, and I think it's pretty smart because Harris is probably one of the best spot-up guys in the NBA, so they are successful and are a very, very good offense for 48 minutes a game, which is important, maybe something you can't say about the Bucks. And then seeing what they can get in transition, I suspect they won't be able to get too much, and then it is a playoff series, so it does slow down, but whenever they can, making sure you can run and generate open shots. And then a few more things, trying to avoid Giannis, for example, you don't want to put Giannis as one of the two defenders in the pick and roll or in a handoff situation, or you don't really want to go at him one-on-one if you're Kevin Durant, because he's so long and so athletic that he can defend almost anything. So maybe they get Giannis switched on to Joe Harris, and then Joe Harris just goes to spot up in the corner. That sort of thing could be smart to make sure you're going up against still good defenders, but guys like Pat Connaughton and Chris Middleton who maybe aren't as intimidating as Giannis. So, if we think of who's going to guard the big three, it's tough for me because I think Jrue Holiday is the Bucks' best defender, and he'll guard Harden or Kyrie. But which one you put him on is interesting because Jrue has proven that he can shut down Kyrie in the 2 games. Obviously, Kyrie's still going to do some stuff, but he is a very, very good defender on the perimeter and can take Kyrie Irving out of the game. But he could also guard Harden and stop sort of their playmaker and their point of attack. So it's interesting. If I'm the Bucks, I probably put Jrue Holiday on Harden because I think you want to stop them getting into their offense. You want to make Kyrie Irving, make Joe Harris, make Bruce Brown do more, and maybe take it out of guys like Harden and KD's hands. Obviously the Nets are going to be a successful offense no matter what, but I think that's probably their best approach, putting Jrue Holiday on Harden. But then that leaves you with the question, do you put Pat Connaughton on Kyrie, or maybe do you put Chris Middleton on Kyrie, even though that's a size differential? So maybe you go Chris Middleton on Harden, Jrue on Kyrie. That matches up more size-wise, and you get your best defenders on the on the Nets' best players. And then how about Giannis? Do you put him on KD and try and take KD out of the game, or maybe do you use him as more of a help defender and put someone like Chris Middleton on Kevin Durant? So I think it's going to be interesting to see the matchups. We won't know until the opening tip, and obviously they'll change throughout the game and throughout the series. Something else is PJ Tucker is also well equipped to guard one of them, probably KD. So if he comes into the game or even starts, I doubt he will, but when he plays, he can be someone who can irritate KD and, just get into him. He's not going to stop him. But he has 6 fouls and he can try and annoy him, put him off balance, put him off his game. So I think that's also something to help stop the big three. And then how much will the Nets go small? They can run a small lineup of Harden, Kyrie, Harris, KD, and Bruce Brown, which has very, very good spacing, can switch defensively because they're all pretty smaller. KD becomes more of a rim protector, and it could be very, very dangerous offensively. Or just they stick with a bigger guy, whether it be Blake or Claxton, or maybe even DeAndre Jordan, though he has not played at all recently. So I suspect they'll go small some, but I also suspect Claxton will play a big role for them, and because he's a big who is athletic enough to defend the pick and roll and set screens and roll to the rim. So, yeah, that's sort of the big rundown. It's also sort of interestingly like a team that was built through the draft and through trades in a small market versus a team that is built off of free agency and big trades in a big market. And then two contrasting big threes like Jrue, Chris, and Giannis. Seems like more of a like a workman big three. Like I'm not saying, I don't mean like any implications with that, but like just like it feels like a group very different from the Harden, Kyrie, KD big three. So it'll be interesting. If we get to my prediction finally, I think this series could definitely go either way. I think it's going to be a really, really good series. It could really go either way. This is so tough, and I'm probably going to get this wrong since I'm not very good at making predictions. But I'll go with the Bucks in 6. I picked the Bucks to win the East. I think they're great versus the Heat. I think they can slow the big three between Drew and Chris Middleton and Giannis and PJ Tucker. And then I also think Giannis is a nightmare matchup for the Nets, and he's unstoppable. I think they also just might have a little bit more chemistry between just having played more games together. So I'm going to go with the Bucks in 6. I could see it going Bucks in 7. I could see it going Nets in 6 or 7 or even 5. Probably not, but we'll see what happens. I'm going with Bucks. But anyways, thanks for watching this video, guys. If you're still here, thanks for watching. Leave a like, subscribe to this channel for more NBA content, and I'll see you guys next time.